and opinions expressed in this webinar are of the resource speaker alone and does not reflect official policy of this office or of the Bureau. We are open to contrary views and opinions. Just reach us out or post them in the comment section.
Good morning everyone. Good morning to our mga kapihan onliners. Our top fan. Good morning, my Buntag Central Visayas. Welcome to our first episode. This is the third and the last part of the webinar of the legal precedents, points of navigation, and of course, with our resource speaker, no less than the ever-gorgeous former city treasurer of Dumaguete City, Mrs. Ofelia Oliva. Okay? So in the midst of uncertainties amidst COVID-19, having clarity of our purpose, our help and guide the Treasury and Assessment Services, our value creation, our relevance. At the same time, let us continue and try out new things fast anytime before. Therefore, we are encouraging everyone to stay focused on our discussion because I'm pretty sure you will learn a lot and apply in your respective LGUs. So, again, in behalf of the BLGF Online Kapihan production team, I am asking everyone to please don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe our YouTube channel so that you will be notified for any updates. So, thank you and good morning everyone.
Okay, now, what is the first law or section in this book on local taxation? Section 128. The provisions herein shall govern the exercise by provinces, cities, municipalities, and barangays of their taxing and other revenue-raising powers. These LGUs mentioned provinces, cities, municipalities, and barangays. These are the political subdivisions of the government. We have the national government, we have also the instrumentalities and agencies, and then we have also the GOCCs. Now, let's go first to unahin ko muna yung NPC. NPC, yeah. Okay. Kung bakit NPC ang lumabas and then NGCP ang nagreklamo. Okay, I'll tell you. Ito ang mga projects ng NPC. Parang sila ang responsible for that generation, transmission, supply, and distribution of electric power. Ha? Do you get me? When it comes to generation and transmission, dati, it is the National Power Corporation. That's why there was a joke before. Pag mag-brown out tayo, pag mag-blackout tayo, ay nako, NPC, National Power Corporation. No? So, ganon. So, it was created under Commonwealth Act number 120 on November 3, 1936. As a non-stock government corporation, meaning non-stock, walang stocks, financed wholly by the national government. So, in 1960, NPC was converted. Kay non-stock man siya, gi-invert into a stock corporation under Republic Act 2641. In 1971, its charter was revised by virtue of Republic Act 6395 as amended. Ito na ang last niya. So, may charter na ang NPC. We call it Republic Act 6395 as amended. NPC was granted an authorized capital stock of 50 billion corresponding to 500 million shares of stock at 100 per par value. At least, naka-generate sila ng 27.049 billion. From its creation up to the late 1980s, the generation, this started in 1936, Ito, 1936, nag-start ang NPC. Now, from 1980, the generation of power and its transmission through the nationwide transmission, we call it, pag nationwide na ang transmission, we call it the grid in the country was vertically integrated. Integrate ang transmission, centrally controlled and managed and wholly owned by NPC. So, wala nang iba, wala nang mga stocks dyan. It was now a government-owned and controlled corporation because ang kanyang generation of power and the transmission through nationwide, which is being now called the grid in the country, was vertically integrated, vertically integrated, centrally controlled and managed, and wholly owned by National Power Corporation. Now, okay. So, sila na sa NPC. Sila na ang manage. Sila ang nag-supply. Sila lahat sila ang gumawa. Okay. So, in June 2001, Republic Act number 9136, otherwise known as the IPERA law. You are all aware of the IPERA law, meaning Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001. Imagine na, 2001, lumabas under Republic Act 9136. IPERA, meaning Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001. It was enacted, this IPERA law was enacted in 2001 to institute reforms in the industry. Aside from the reforms in the industry, the major aspects of the reform include restructuring of the entire power industry to introduce competition in the generation sector. Meaning to say, hindi na control sa NPC lahat. So, gi-welcome na sa government na may merong mga papasok na particularly in the generation. So, gi-restructure ang the entire power industry to introduce competition in the generation of electric power. So, okay na yung magka-supply, you are welcome. Number 2, reform. Change from government to private ownership. So parang nabibigatan na ang government nga, ano ba ito, lahat ng kuan, nag-subsidize na lang kami. So that's why ang ginawa is change from government to private ownership. Later on, sino yung private owner? I will discuss it with you. Next, number 3, reform. Introduction of a stable regulatory framework for the electricity sector. So meaning stable na ang framework sa electricity sector. Hindi na pareho before, is paiba-iba ito. Now, itong IPERA organized the industry into 4 sectors. Ano itong sectors? Remember these 4 sectors because this is very important in your cases. Generation, transmission, distribution, and supply. Yun ang 4 sectors under the IPERA law or the Electric Power Industry Reform Act. Okay. The structural reforms resulted, among others, in the creation of two government-owned and controlled corporation. Because of the IPERA law, nanganak itong NPC. There were 2 GOCCs formed. We call that the sum. Kanang sum ba na sa Bible, Psalm 41, ito. Ito sa generation sector is, ang sum, ang meaning ng sum is Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation. The sum. I-create yan because of the IPERA law and the National Transmission Corporation, which we call the Transco. Nakuha na ninyo. Bakit may NPC? Bakit may Transco? Saan sila galing? Galing sa IPERA law. Ano pang nandoon aside from the Transco? Nandoon ang SAM. Ano itong SAM? Ang SAM was created to take ownership of all existing generation assets. So paiba-iba na. So ang pag-control is talagang may gi-assign na para at least maganda ang pagkadala ng power generation of the country. So SAM was created to take ownership of all existing generation assets, independent power producers contracts, real estate, and all other disposable assets, and to assume all liabilities and obligations of the NPC. Ha? Listen, and to assume all liabilities and obligations of NPC. So sana ang SAM ang kinausap. Okay. The principal purpose of SAM is to manage the orderly sales, disposition, and privatization of NPC's assets with the objective of liquidating in an optimal manner all the NPC's financial obligations and stranded contract costs. On the other hand, so very clear na nga bakit nandoon ang SAM. On the other hand, Transco was created to take over the electric transmission function. Yung sa SAM, yung pag-dispose sa mga assets, pag-assume all the liabilities and obligations. So yun ang puso, meaning to manage the sales, the disposition, and the privatization of NPC's assets. Okay, nakuha na ninyo yan. Now, here comes Transco. Ano na naman itong Transco? Yun ang partner ng kuwan because to each his own. Yun ang gagawin mo. Ito ang gagawin mo. Okay. So Transco was created to take over the electric transmission function of NPC. So ang NPC wala na electric transmission function except yung tawag dito is the missionary electrification function of NPC. Nandoon na sila sa mga, yung parang mga remote rural areas, yun function yun jurisdiction yun ng NPC. So yun na ang NPC. So ang naggawa na dito is the SAM na pag mga non-generation functions, SAM. Pag generation and transmission function, it's the Transco, the National Transmission Corporation. Okay. No? Any question? Do you understand na? Nakakita na ninyo ang historical background of NGCP. Okay. Transco was created to take over the electric transmission function of NPC. And the responsibility for planning, construction, and centralized operation and maintenance of high voltage transmission facilities, including grid interconnections and ancillary services. NPC was retained as a GOCC. Hindi nawala ang NPC. It was retained as GOCC to perform the missionary electrification function. To manage the watersheds and dams, yun ang function sa NPC. Management of the Angat Dam. Okay, NPC yan. And then, to operate and maintain the generation assets transferred to SAM pending their disposal. So, ang SAM na, i-transfer sa NPC to SAM, ang SAM na bahala mag-dispose, and then, pagkatapos ng SAM, here comes the, itong Transco, I have already discussed the Transco, the National Transmission Corporation. So, again Transco was created under Republic Act 9136. Ano itong Republic Act 9136? It is the IPERA Law of 2001. Then Transco operated and managed the power transmission system that links power plants to the electric distribution utilities nationwide. Transco na yan. Hindi na NPC. Transco. The same law mandated the privatization of Transco. Okay. Now, the same law, the IPERA law, nagsasabi na dapat mag-privatize ang Transco through an outright sale or management concession agreement. Was there an outright sale? No, sir. Was there a management concession agreement? There was, sir. Try to read the management concession agreement to understand the franchise tax of Transco. to understand the whole process. Ano bang liabilities ng Transco? Ano bang liabilities ng NPC? Kung makita ninyo ang concession agreement which took effect January 15, 2009. Okay. Now there was a public bidding because welcome na nila ang mga private sectors. Was a public bidding conducted in December 2007. Imagine ha, the IPIRA law was enacted 2001. But the public bidding of the Transco until December 2007. It was awarded to the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. Ano itong National Grid Corporation of the Philippines? Yun ang kasama ko sa LBAA, CBAA, yun ang kasama ko sa Court of Tax Appeals, yun ang kasama ko sa Supreme Court. He was my darling during my heydays. Okay, so it was awarded to the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, which eventually secured a congressional franchise. Ano itong congressional franchise, ladies and gentlemen? Congressional franchise through Republic Act 9511. Please memorize the Republic Act. Republic Act 7160, the LGC, Republic Act 9136, the IPIRA Law, Republic Act 9511. This is the franchise of National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. So that in order, parang pag magpunta ang NGCP sa inyong mga LGUs, here comes the NGCP, you are ready. Try to read their historical background. Try to read the concession agreement. Try to read the franchise by heart. Because at least pagpunta nila doon, you will know how to react. You will know how to persuade them to pay taxes. Do not coerce them. They are our bread and butter. Because sila nagbabayad sa taxes. Mahalin natin ang ating mga partners in crime. So eventually, itong NGCP, National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, eventually secured a congressional franchise to operate the transmission network, transmission network sa whole Philippines. Republic Act 9511. On January 15, 2009. January 2009, how many years after? 2 years. Transco turned over the management and operation of the nationwide transmission system to NGCP. I-turn over na because NGCP ang nanalo sa bidding. Nandoon ang parang, ano ba yun, Monte de Oro, the owner of Banco de Oro. Okay, so turn over the management and operation of its nationwide transmission system to NGCP. Ownership of all transmission assets, however, listen, very important. Ownership of all transmission assets, however, remains with Transco. Meaning there was no outright sale. Because of the concession agreement, gitransfer, giturn over ang lahat ng assets of Transco. But the ownership, my dear ladies and gentlemen, the ownership remains with Transco. Any question? Okay, NGCP na yan. Walang question. It's either nga parang you do not understand or parang very clear na ang gi-lecture ko sa inyo. Okay. After the Transco, NGCP. Okay. So let's discuss about NGCP. NGCP, National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. Pag magsasabi ng grid, yung the whole network, a vast network of electric lines, yun ang grid. So, NGCP is privately owned corporation in charge of operating, remember operation, maintenance, and development of the country's state-owned power grid. So, sila ang mag-operate, sila ang mag-maintain, sila ang mag-develop. Memorize that. Operate, maintain, and develop. It is an interconnected system that transmits gigawatts of power at thousands of volts from where it is made to where it is needed. The company performs its mandate as transmission service provider. Sila ang mag-transmit, sila ang provider. Okay. With the full awareness of its nature as a public utility. So, ang kanilang nature as a corporation, it is a public utility. But it doesn't mean na they are vested with the powers of a governmental or a GOCC. It is the nature of the work classifies them as essential public utility. The nature. And in full compliance with the rules and regulations of the regulator and existing laws governing its transmission operations. So yun ang NGCP. Now, generation or the legislators, no, di ba, they passed the EPIRA law, and then the EPIRA introduced to major restructuring and the privatization. Restructuring called for the separate components of the power sector: generation, transmission, distribution, and supply. Electricity rates were unbundled to allow consumers to see each individual component of the electricity service they are paying for. Generation was privatized through the sale of generation assets. Transmission was spun off to government-owned National Transmission Corporation in preparation for its eventual privatization via concession. Okay. Now, I think it's time to open the provisions of the tax provisions. Okay. Now, before I discuss the case, it's very easy just listening the discussion of the case. Let's go muna to the provisions. Because these provisions, ito ang mga legal basis. Why I collected real property tax? I collected real property tax. No? And then, why nga I will institute the remedies? This is not to coerce in PC or in GCP to pay. But this is part of my job as treasurer because of the following provisions. Please listen to the following provisions. You have been reading this provision by heart sa local government code, but sometimes pag magbasa ka parang ang tagal ma-absorb ang provision, di ba? Kasi pag magbasa ka, iba ang iniisip mo kung baka darating dito ang Delta variant, baka hawaan ako or ano to. So forget about the variant. Sabi ko sa inyo, be positive. Do not think of the negative effects of the epidemic, no? Okay, or the pandemic. I mean. So let's first deal on Section 205. The listing of real property in the assessment roll. Why I collected from the NGPC. Why it appeared in my list of taxpayers. Why it appeared on the delinquent taxes. So Section 205 is my basis. Now, what is Section 205? Listing of real property in the assessment rolls. Paragraph D, real property owned by the Republic of the Philippines. Its instrumentalities and political subdivisions. Yung its instrumentalities, no? Yun na ang yung mga ginagamit sa gobyerno. Transco is an instrumentality. Political divisions is the LGUs, including the barangay. Now, these mga properties, no, owned by this group, particularly the Republic of the Philippines, they are exempted. Hindi sila mag-appeal sila sa assessment roll, but they will appear as exempt properties. But when I examined the assessment roll, it did not fall under the exempt properties, but in the taxable properties. Who am I to question the jurisdiction of the assessor? Bakit ito taxable? Dapat exempt ito. When it is favorable to the government, I will adopt it. But when it is not favorable, I will reject it. I'll tell you, ito na ang binigay ng assessor. This was discussed. This amount was discussed during the setting of targets in the BLGF. And these collections were included in my target. Once is i-exempt sa assessor later on, after na-submit ko na ang target ko sa BLGF, ma-decrease ang chance ko of collecting my quota, my target. Diba? So, in this case, kung collectible yan, kay taxable yan, no, I have to collect it. And when I collect it, if everything will be collected, my collection efficiency will shoot up. So that is favorable to my office. Favorable collection activities. So I will not question. But if that was placed under exempt, I will question the assessor. Why exempt? Where in the provision of Book 2, Title 2 of the Local Government Code nag-exempt? Now here comes paragraph D. Real property owned by the Republic of the Philippines is instrumentalities and political subdivisions, the beneficial use of which has been granted for consideration or otherwise to a taxable person shall be listed, shall be valued, shall be assessed in the name of the possessor, not actually in the name of the owner. Pwede nga iba ang owner doon sa tax declaration, but since that was the use of the property has been transferred to another taxable person, he will become the possessor but not the owner. Possessor but not owner, because ang kanyang gipossess is just the beneficial use of the property. So, the grantee of the public entity if such property has been acquired or held for resale or lease. That's paragraph D. That is section 205. Let's go to section 206. Now, section 206 treats on the proof of exemption of real property taxation. I'll tell you, exemption is not automatic. Just like na ang provisions of the Local Government Code, hindi automatic ang application. Remember, the provisions are there. You have to make it operative and effective in your local government unit. Those provisions must be enacted through an ordinance. Hindi automatic. How much more when it is exemption? Exemption is not automatic. As we have dealt, the first provision I presented to you was the exemption must be expressed in a clear and ambiguous term, unequivocal term, yung exemption. So ito, para applicable ang exemption, there must be proof of the exemption. Every person, by and for whom real property is declared, who shall claim tax exemption for such property under this title Book 2, Real Property Taxation, shall file with the provincial, city, or municipal assessor within 30 days from the date of the declaration of real property. So wala na, because why? In PC pa ang owner dati. So that's why you cannot tell them nga within 30 days from the date of the declaration of real property. Sufficient documentary evidence. There must be documentary evidence to support the claim for tax exemption. So, ano itong documentary evidence in support of the claim of tax exemption? Corporate chart, title of the ownership, articles of incorporation, bylaws, contracts, affidavits, certification, mortgage deeds, and similar documents, concession agreement, pwede. Then, the franchise provision, pwede para i-present mo. Pero you will just go there and make yaw-yaw or complaints to the LBAE no? Is hindi yun pwede. I-submit mo nga, I am exempted, look at this, look at that. No? So, pwede namang mag-meeting tayo, assessor, treasurer, and the LBEE, together with the complaining taxpayer. Mag-meeting tayo, sir. Huwag mo nang isulat. Who knows nga, sa atin lang dito is masittle natin ang gusto nyo. Okay? Kanabang, you have to exercise. Sometimes you have to sleep with the enemy para makuha mo ang gusto mo. No? Sleeping with the enemy, meaning you have to be good, you have to be friendly with the taxpayers. But, hindi yung too much friendship naman, nga hindi na lang sila magbayad ng taxes. Oh, nako, iwalay tayo dyan. If you don't pay your taxes, then do not come near the tax collector, especially when she danced. Okay, now, that is section 206, no? If the required evidence is not, listen, if the required evidence is not submitted within the period herein prescribed, the property shall be listed as taxable. Hindi ka nag-submit, hindi nag-submit ang NPC, hindi nag-submit ang Transco, hindi nag-submit rin ang NGCP. So that's why failure to submit the evidence of tax exemption, ano ang mangyayari? That will be listed as taxable. No? The property shall be listed as taxable in the assessment roll. Okay. However, if the property shall be proven to be tax exempt, the same shall be dropped from the assessment roll. Pag ma-proven to, hala, they are able, no? May kuan sila, may point sila nga exempted ito. So pag exempted iso, okay, Mr. Assessor, are you willing to exempt? Let's conduct an ocular inspection because as per the franchise, as per the provisions of the local government code, if the equipment or if the property in the form of equipment and machineries are used for the transmission and generation of electric power, then that property is exempt. Transmission and generation because it is in the franchise law of the NGCP. But when they able to prove, they sent lahat ng mga complaints, petitions for exemption. But please, where are the reasons for exemption? So again, pero anyway, since there was that decision from the court, now, it was mandated nga the assessor and the treasurer will not refund, no? The NGCP will ask from NPC, at least, okay ako. Now, what about the assessor? The assessor will have to go to the power site, the site of the NGCP, to inspect whether this taxable building built by the city government, this kind of building, this kind of land built by the city government is exempt. I don't know what happened next. They went to that site, but I don't know if they accepted nga, this is a clubhouse. A clubhouse is not used for the transmission and generation of electric power. A clubhouse, nandun ang mga members of the clubhouse. They're discussing how to go on their business. And then, what about the powerhouse? Meaning, nandoon ang mga makina, nandoon ang mga machines, nandoon ang mga equipment. Why? Is the land used in the transmission and generation of electric power? Nandoon ang mga machineries. But is that actually directly and exclusively used for transmission and generation of power? The three elements to be exempt must be present. Absence of actual use does not exempt you. Absence of directly use will not exempt you. Absence of exclusively use will not exempt you. Assuming it is exclusively used, but is it directly? Meaning to say, ang land, kinuha ang land and then parang gi-include sa generation of transmission? They try to think of my position. Am I right? I am not saying they are wrong, It's up to you. Pero ako, I am asking you, am I right? Walang nag-answer. Takot kayo? Now, if I am right, I know because may basis ako. Okay, Section 206. Any question? Wala pa rin question. I'll proceed to Section 208. Okay, Section 208, notification of the transfer of real property ownership. There was a transfer of real property ownership. It was not discussed in the merits of the case. In the facts of the case, wala. But the notification of transfer, meaning once meron kang real property nga gi-transfer through sale, gi-transfer through concession, dapat i-notify mo ang assessor. Ano bang alam niya nga nandoon ang kual iba ng may-ari pag hindi mo i-notify? Di ba kung bibili tayo ng lupa, dapat mayroon magbayad tayo ng transfer tax. Pagkatapos ng bayad ng transfer tax, magpunta ka pang Register of Deeds to verify kung wala ba itong parang clear ba ito. Magpunta ka pang court clearance, wala ba itong kaso. Magpunta ka pa sa Sendro kung wala ba itong kaso sa Sendro. Magpunta pa kang DANR. Ang daming puntahan. Noon, punta ka lang sa Register of Deeds. Tapos, basta magbayad ka lang. What is important is your payment. I don't care kung ano yung mga sabi ng mga Sendro, mga DANR. Okay, now, so, was the assessor notified nga there was a concession agreement? Was the assessor aware of the IPIRA law? Can you blame the assessor for not knowing the current events? Maybe the assessor was so engrossed in his duties as city assessor. Pag-type lang ng tax declaration, bago. So, Section 208, and I will read. Any person who shall transfer real property ownership to another shall notify the city assessor concerned within 60 days. Gitransfer yon sa Transco to NGCP no January 15. Was there a notification nga, hoy, assessor, di na sa akon ang transmission assets of the Transco? 60 days, na-expire, wala pa. The notification shall include the mode of transfer. Anong mode of transfer? Concession. The description of the property alienated. O ano ba itong mga description? Powerhouse, clubhouse, administrative building. I was there. The initial inspection, I was there. Ito ginamit ng administration, ng mga office, ng mga clerks. Is this used in the generation and transmission of electric power? No, sir. No, ma'am. Okay. Then, the name and address of the transferee. The name and address of the transferee, yung gitransfera ng Transco assets. Anong the name niya? National Grid Corporation of the Philippines. Okay. So that's in Section 208. Let's go to the next section. Section 215. Section 215, classes of real property for assessment purposes. So, you must be knowledgeable kung ano bang classes for assessment purposes. For assessment purposes, real property shall be classified as residential, agricultural, commercial, industrial, mineral, timberland, and ito na ang pinagawayan, special. You're special to my heart in GCP. You're special to my heart, taxpayers of any kind, as long as you are inside Cebu City. No, the taxpayers of the real taxpayers of Mandawi, they are special to the hearts of Attorney Regal. Ito naman sa Talisay, special to the hearts, no, of the treasurer of Talisay. Huh? So make them special, but not for assessment purposes. Special. Now, who are entitled to the assessment as special? Basahin natin to. The city or municipality within Metropolitan Manila, no, the classes. Okay, through the respective sanggunian shall have the power to classify lands as residential, agricultural, timberland, or in accordance with their zoning ordinance. zoning ordinance nila, hindi ang assessor ang mag-classify kung timberland ba ito or special ba ito. It's the ordinance of the sangguniang panglungsod, pangguniang bayan, or no, hindi sangguniang bayan, sangguniang panlalawigan. Because real property is the domain, the terrain of the provincial assessor or the treasurer. So no, okay, deputized lang ang munisipyo. That's why walang mga respective sanggunian lang nilagay. So, based on the zoning ordinance, ito ang classification. Because the classification of the assessor, the local assessor, is based on the actual use of the property. Therefore, kung may bibilhin ang NGCP later, bibili kami ng lupa. So, exempt ito because this will be used for the transmission of and generation. Oh my God, mere intent on the use of the property does not exempt the property from assessment. You will not be classified as special until magamit ninyo, until it is put into use by the possessor or owner or the grantee, no? So ano bang use? Because why? Because assessment is based on actual use. Paano ko pag-assess nga bibilhin ba man ninyo o nandoon na binili na pero you don't know, wala pa sa inyong transmission development plan. Wala pa. So I will wait. So ang tax declaration wala pa, hindi rin na-transfer sa kanilang pangalan. It is still in the name of NPC or Transco. So anong mangyari? So NPC and Transco, just like my letter. My demand letter was addressed to NPC and Transco. NPC bar Transco. It was never addressed to NGCP. It's only nga since it was brought to the office of NPC before, ang nakatanggap ang NGCP kaya nandoon na sila. It's not my fault. They could have forwarded the collection bill or they could have forwarded the demand letters to the office of NPC. Oy, ito ang utang ninyo. Ang utang ay dapat babayaran para tayo ay pagkatiwalaan. At the same time, para hindi ma-auction ang real properties ninyo. Pag ma-auction na ito, i-auction ko ang lahat ng mga machineries for transmission and generation. What a catastrophe. That will make me unpopular. Decision very unpopular. That will masira ang mga political motives of our mga political personalities. Okay. So ganun ha. Now, let's go to the next, to 16. Very nice itong provision na ito. Special classes of real property. Why? Because ito na naman ang i-complain. All lands, buildings, and other improvements thereon, actually, directly and exclusively used for, nandoon, hospital, scientific, and, ito this portion, and those owned and used by local water district or government-owned or controlled corporation, GOCCs, this refers to GOCCs, rendering essential public services in the supply and distribution or generation and transmission of electric power shall be classified as special. Meaning to be classified as a special kind of real property and subject only to the 10% of the fair market value of the property to be classified is, in this case, they were not, or they were not a GOCC. NPC, GOCC. Transco, GOCC. Some GOCC. But the generation and transmission was already transferred to NGCP, no? Through the beneficial use. And it has been provided in the law na when the beneficial use is being transferred for consideration or otherwise to a taxable person, that property is no longer is taxable. And therefore, since it was transferred to a private entity, she cannot claim exemption under this provision because he is a private property. Only GOCC involved or doing functions in the generation and transmission of electric power shall be classified as special. Do you agree, ladies and gentlemen? May I hear some? Yes, ma'am. Are you listening? Attorney Tanyika?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yes, we are
may mga
listening.
tao ba ba tayong
Yeah,
nakikinig?
meron, ma'am. We have 57 participants out of
47.
52
Ma'am,
registrants.
dito kami.
Okay, nandiyan din mo. Kay I was worried nga lang. Ako na lang ganyan.
In case you need a break, ma'am, kasi iba rin yung tuloy-tuloy yung discussion. Just signal us. We have reserved
Okay.
Mentimeter trivia type questions pa, ma'am.
Okay. Now, another. Let's go to the next, section 217. Actual use of real property as basis for assessment. I have been saying this provision a while ago. Real property shall be classified, valued, and assessed on the basis of its actual use, regardless of where located, whoever owns it, and whoever uses it. Meaning, even if in PC, as the owner, but the user of that property, meaning to say, the property is now kung saan na-locate ang property, o sino ang may-ari, o whoever uses it through the beneficial user theory, the property shall be classified on the basis of its actual use. I-discuss yun kanina, actual use is the basis. Let's go to 218, assessment level. Meaning to say, we have assessment level. Assessment level applied to the to the market value, that will be the taxable value. The taxable value, the taxable or assessed value times the rate of kanina rin na-mute. Okay. Now, assessment level. I repeat, kay parang na-mute ko kanina. Itong assessment level, it is the percentage applied to the market value to arrive at the taxable value or assessed value. Yung assessed value, i-apply mo ang rate of levy, depende ang rate of levy sa inyong local tax code or the omnibus code or the revenue code, whatever you call it. So, nandoon, i-apply mo, yun ang tax due. Nandoon ang tax due. What will become of the tax due? Titingnan ko lang yun. Di ba, maghanap ako nga, is this tax due already paid? Di ba, nandoon lang sa ating database. Titingnan ko sinong hindi nakabayad. Every week, by Friday afternoon, sinong nagbayad, sinong hindi nakabayad. Kung malaki ang bayad, I will send you a thank you letter. You are special to the hearts of the city government of Cebu City. You are special. Pero hindi nagbabayad, if this will not be paid within 7 working days, this property shall be auctioned. Imagine. Because of that, natatakot sila. They paid. Oh my God. That is what we call persuasion. Through, hindi naman coercive processes because that is allowed under the law, but itong persuasion through a simple, the art of collecting taxes. So your personality, I don't know if there is such thing as personality. That's why I'll tell you, as I've been telling all the managers of Veterans Bank, I'll tell you, treasurer and assessor, act like a treasurer. Try to develop your personality. Na paglabas mo sa munisipyo or sa kapitolyo, is you look like a treasurer. Kana bang here comes the majesty, the queen. Di ba? I'll tell you, personality plays a very important role in the collection process. I'll tell you through experience, especially when I wear miniskirt and then in front of the complaining taxpayer, I will cross my legs, this and that. That is a collection strategy. Di ba? Di ba, Director? It's a collection strategy. That's very nice. I'll tell you. That's why, talagang, I don't know basta na-impressed yung iba. Well, just showing the legs, I don't commit any mortal sin. It's upon yung bang, how you look at me. Para bang, ito, I'm giving you something very, kuan ba? That will arouse you nga, para bang, it will make you active. Kung taxpayer ka, mawawala yung galit mo. Ma'am, sabi ng sekretary ko, ma'am, mayroong lawyer galit na galit, ma'am. Then I asked him, ma'am, sir, would you like to be served coffee or you like? No, it's not the coffee that I am coming for. It's your treasurer. Well, let him come in. I am better than the coffee. Oh, so, nandun ang taxpayer. Then, I will get out from my swivel chair and I will sit in front of him, in front of the taxpayer with a crossed legs. May bawal that. Don't cross your legs when you're seated. No, do not believe that. You cross your legs. That is a collection strategy. So, nandun na. Pag nakita niyang legs ko, ay naku, nawawala yung kanyang galit. Para bang he was elevated to the heavens and to the skies. Then looking for the stars and the moons who were to look for tax exemptions. Nawawala na siya, parang ganun. That is a collection strategy, ladies and gentlemen. So please improve your personality. Kanang act like a treasurer. Huwag kayong matatakot nga para bang, baka i-examine kami, ma'am, yung lifestyle check. Oh, that's part of being ikuan. I-lifestyle tayo, pero pag wala silang makita sa lifestyle, is bakit? Kung mag-wear ako ng mga dangling earrings sa mga 18 carats, bili ko sa Colon, is that expensive jewelries? Tingali, in the eyes of the beholder, expensive yun. Why? It's Mrs. Oliva. Pero you don't know nga, these are all fake. I don't wear genuine jewelries, ladies and gentlemen. I'm afraid it might be snatched. No, this one will be snatched. So that's why these are not true jewelries. These are, it's just a matter of how you apply makeup, of how you comb your hair. That's part of your collection strategy. Assessor and treasurer, please, when you go home, start throwing out your dress nga, para bang you go to the kuan with t-shirts lang and maong. No, don't wear maong inside the office. It's bawal. You wear high heels. I don't allow my people in the Cebu City Treasury to wear flat shoes. No, sir. High heels. Why? That will add credence. That will add parabang confidence not to collect for more. Now, that's the assessment level, ladies and gentlemen. The assessment level, adto yun kung anon sa mga sanggunian, hindi assessor ang mag-on sa assessment level. Next.
Ma'am Ophel.
Yes.
We'll give you a water break muna para you'll have water muna. So, in the meantime, we'll have the Mentimeter trivia pa rin tungkol sa iyong sarili, ma'am.
Thank you.
Can we do that, ma'am?
Okay.
Ayan. On the note na nagbigay ng points of navigation na po si Ma'am Ophel, kakaibang points of navigation, yung skirt daw, yung mini skirt niya, isang revenue generation technique daw yan. So, minsan nga, ito trivia. Tinanong ng mayor si Ma'am Ophel, bakit ang iksi-iksi ng skirt mo, Mrs. Oliva? Sabi ni Mrs. Oliva, respond niya sa mayor, sabi niya, the shorter my legs, my skirts are, the greater my collection would be. Yun po yung sabi ni Mrs. Oliva. Okay, now we'll go to Miss Sara Mitante para sa ating mentimeter.com trivia Q&A type pa rin. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, Torns. For the next set of questions, may I request the participants to please go back to menti.com and use the code. Use the code 91105172.
Okay, please type in sa URL nyo sa address doon sa browser sa taas, www.menti.com. Tapos once in, you use the code 91105172. So this is actually a real-time quick survey trivia type. So lahat po mag-participate, so just to break the monotony pa rin yan.
Turns.
Yes, sir.
Excuse Turns.
Go ahead,
Ni-react ko dayon si Sir Jimmy Turns pag ingon ni Ma'am Ofelia nga. Kuan ko no, new collection strategy tong pag-cross sa iyang legs.
Sana makasample si Ma'am Ophel paano yun mag-cross ng legs.
Paano kaya Turns pag lalaki yung treasurer Turns?
Paano daw pag lalaki yung
Oh, sabi ni Sir Jimmy Torso, let the legs do the talking daw. Oh.
Jimmy o CP Garcia, siya yung pasimuno sa topic na to eh. Nagtanong kasi siya tungkol sa NGCP.
Lalaki daw to,
katanungan dyan
sabi
sa
ni
chat
ano.
box. Mamaya,
Oh.
i-entertain natin yung mga questions dyan sa chat box.
Sige, Tors.
Okay. Go ahead, sir. Mayroon na bang participant dyan sa menti.com? Please, pag mayroon kayong cellphone, baka naman you can go to www.menti.com tapos yung code na yon gamitin niyo po. Okay. Nasa chat box po yung code. Okay, let's go ahead, sir.
Okay, Torns, we only have 10 participants for these Torns.
That would do.
Sige. Sige. So for question 1, where is the last LGU that she was designated? We have options: Tacloban City, Pasay City, and Toledo City.
Log in your answers now. Saan po huling na-designate as treasurer si Mrs. Oliva? Sa Tacloban po ba? Sa Pasay po ba? O sa Toledo? Yan, sabi ni Ma'am Jocelyn sa chatbox, Pasay daw. Yan. Yan. Nag-countdown pa po yung ating Mentimeter sa 10 participant. Makikita po natin yung mga kasagutan. Ayan.
So the correct answer is Toledo City. We have 5
Toledo.
participants who got the correct answer. Next question. What is Mrs. Ofelia Oliva's favorite pastime?
Ayan, favorite pastime ni Mrs. Oliva po. Ano yung choices, Sar?
So we have options. 1, watching Korean novelas. 2, watching news. And 3, watching Ipatulfo Mo.
Uy, Patulpo, Idol Rafi, kasali pala yan. Watching news, watching Korean novela, or watching Rafi Tulpo. Yan. Anong sagot?
Ako tanong ko nun sa attorney, sabay ba ito nga we have also conducted dialogue with
Mute, RD.
Yeah, ang
Di na
sagot
lang.
is
The correct
watching
answer
Idol
is
Rafi.
watching Ipatulfo Mo.
hindi.
We have 3 participants who got the correct
Ayan,
answer.
pastime pala yan ni Mrs. Oliva, watching Idol Rafi. Next
Kita
question,
niya yung
Sar.
Torns, yung sa ano, Torns, yung sa
Oh,
food package Torns.
yung lechon package. Nanonood para si Mrs.
Di ba
Oliva.
gipatulpo yun, Torns?
Oo, pinatulpo. Yan pala yung pastime ni Mrs. Oliva. Yan. Yan. Next question, sir.
Question 3, for a particular topic that Mrs. Oliva discusses to her audience, how many hours does she prepare for this?
Yan, preparation for her
We have
discussion.
24 hours or 1 day, 48 hours or 2 days, or 72 hours, 3 days.
Yes, please, log in your answer. Pag nagdi-discuss po si Mrs. Oliva ng isang topic, how many hours does she need to prepare daw? Yan. Sabi,
The correct answer is 72 hours or 3 days.
tatlong araw.
Mag-prepare si Ma'am Opi.
Ayan, kay ganyan kabusisi si Mrs. Oliva. 3 araw siya mag-prepare sa isang discussion. Next question, sir.
Very particular.
Ito. Parang ito yung revenue generation strategy question yata.
So the fourth question, what is Mrs. Ofelia Oliva's maiden name?
Yung middle name niya. Ano kaya yun? Pascual ba? Yan yung mga choices. Kasi Mendoza. Ano yan, Sid? Yung nasa gitna? Monterola?
Yes. Monterola
Martinez.
Martinez.
So ano po yung maiden name ni Mrs. Oliva? Lagyan niyo
May gani
answer,
walay
sir.
kuan Mondragon.
Mundago. Ano yan? Yayamanin si Miss Oliva.
Oo, kanang mga
Wow,
pinadato.
many got the correct answer. The correct answer is Mendoza.
Ito, revenue generation tips ito, panghuling question.
So this is the most interesting question.
Ito. Kakadiscuss lang ni Mrs. Oliva ang question na ito. I'm sure yung nakalagin sa
How many inches is usually the length of Mrs. Ofelia Oliva's miniskirt from her knees?
Ayan.
So I have first 4 inches. Second,
Murag
6
baka
inches.
answer ani si Sir Jimmy Torrance.
How many inches daw usually is the length of Mrs. Oliva's miniskirt? Ayan. Ba't nawala ako?
Torrance, kung babae daw nga treasurer kay legs, no, ang ipakita. Pero ingon sabi ni
Sino yan?
The correct answer is 8 inches. Kisa kayo nakakuha sa
Wow.
correct answer.
Ayan. Okay, for these trivia questions, we'd like to acknowledge Attorney Regal M. Oliva as our source. Siya po yung informant namin sa mga interesting at flattering questions, trivia type na po yan. So, kung galit mo man po si Mrs. Oliva ay ang nagbigay lang ng mga information niya si Attorney Regal M. Oliva. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sid. Ophel, are you ready for the next part of your discussion, Ma'am Ophel? 3 days ka pala nag-prepare, ha?
Actually, nagkamali kayo doon nga 3 days. Usually, yung hours na ma-consume ko is yung hours sa makeup, sa damit. Pero when it comes to yung sa lecture ko, is magbasa lang ako sa provisions, then yung adlib ko, yung knowledge ko through experience, yun lang. Yun ang makadala sa kalami ba sa lecture. Kasi pag mag-prepare ka, you have all your mga presentation mo, then basa ka lang, wala kang mga adlib, wala kang mga ganon, hindi maganda ang lecture, di ba? Okay ba kayo? Now, I will start now with the last 2 provisions. The Board of Assessment Appeals and the effect of the appeal. So, pag ang taxpayer is not satisfied with the decision of the assessor or the assessment of the assessor, or yung pagbayad niya is too high and oppressive, is pwede siyang makapunta sa local board of assessment appeals. Why? Because any owner or person having legal interest in the property who is not satisfied with the action of the local assessor in the assessment of his property may, within 60 days from the date of receipt of the notice of assessment, appeal to the Board of Assessment Appeals of the city or province by filing a petition under oath in the form prescribed for the purpose, together with copies of tax declarations and such affidavits or documents submitted in support of the appeal. So, muapilar na siya sa Local Board of Assessment Appeals, or in short, LBAA. Now, what is the effect of this assessment? Pag mag-assess, pag may mag-appeal ang taxpayer to the LBAA, it does not suspend the payment of real property taxes. So the effect of appeal on the payment of real property tax, no, is in no case shall suspend the collection of the realty taxes on the property involved as assessed by the assessor without prejudice to subsequent adjustment depending upon the final outcome of the appeal. Bayad muna bago entertainment. Okay. Now, let's go na to the case, no? So, I think I have discussed the important provisions related or applicable to the NGCP versus Oliva. Okay. Let us first take the Local Board of Assessment Appeals. So, yung when I send demand letters, nagpunta ang NGCP. Ito ang facts of the case, ha? Nagpunta ang NGCP sa office, then nagbayad. But first, bago sila nagbayad, sabi nila, bakit sila ang magbayad? Sabi ko, because of, kung magbayad kayo ngayon, maski babayaran ninyo ang tax ninyo, is that will be applied to prior years delinquency. Mayroon tayong provision dyan. Application of tax payments, no? I-apply first on the prior year's delinquency bago isettle ang current year. Okay. So that's why, kung gusto ninyo, bayad mo under protest. That's why nagbayad sila under protest. Pagbayad nila under protest is, of course, ayaw ko namang magsabi nga, okay ka nang, okay lang ito. So pag magbayad ka under protest within 60 days or 30 days from the receipt of the protest, kailangan nga aside nga nagbayad na sila, paid under protest, no? Magpunta na sila sa LBA. No, okay. So, payment under protest is a condition sine qua non, meaning it is a condition good nga before ma-entertain ang protest mo, there must be payment under protest. Otherwise, no, walang jurisdiction ang LBAA sa treasury. So, payment under protest is a must. Now, yun ang facts of the case. So, after that, that was, meaning to say, this is now the decision, no? Decision of the local board of the central appeals, okay? Tapos assessment appeals. Ano lang petition? When it comes to the kuan, mag-petition, mag-reclaim ka sa local board of assessment, tawag ninyo is the petitioner. Treasurer sa appeal ang assessor, kasali so dyan, is we are the mag-answer sa kanilang, ang tawag namin respondent. Mag-appeal na nga to sa assessment appeals, kung sa petitioner, NGCP is petitioner appellant. Ang tawag naman namo is respondent